Okay, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. I think we should better start on time because we have a very busy agenda this afternoon. We have four interesting topics and an hour and a half for this session too. So I'm Xavier Kurtz. I'm Head of Surveillance and Epidemiology Service in the Pharmacovigilance and Epidemiology Department. And I have the great pleasure to co-chair this session with Rafał Ziorzowski. I'm not sure if this is good, okay. Who is a member of the European Conservation Coalition, a member of the Patient and Consumers Working Party, but he's also a distinguished scientist, and he's a member of scientific advisory board. For example, he's a member of the scientific advisory board of the ADVANCE project, which is an IMI project on vaccines. So in order to try to be on time with these very interesting topics, I will shortly introduce each speaker and then the topic, and then Rafał will lead the discussion that will take place after at the end of the session. I'm going to ask the speakers to be disciplined and to stick to the time so that we can have sufficient time for the discussion. And we will allow one or two burning questions after each presentation, and then there will be a more in-depth discussion at the end. So I propose that we start with Sabine Brosch, who is from EMA, also working in the Surveillance and Epidemiology Service, and she will introduce an important topics, which are the new functionalities and access policy of drug vigilance. So, Sabine, up to you.
Thank you very much. And as our meeting today is really focused on the implementation of the pharmacovigilance legislation, I can say that this is also one of the milestones that was planned and foreseen in the pharmacovigilance legislation. So the improvement of the ultravigilance functionalities. And today I would like to give you a very brief update on where we are with the new improved system, but then also focus a little bit on the benefits also for patients and healthcare professionals as regards the new functionalities that we are going to implement. So the project was initiated formally in October 2013. So we have set up a project team. We have defined all the requirements and functional specifications in collaboration with our different stakeholders. And one of the key provisions in the pharmacovigilance legislation was also to have an independent audit of this new system, of the new functionalities, to make sure that it meets the stakeholder expectations. And once we have had a successful audit, we would then need to seek advice from the Pharmacovigilance Risk Assessment Committee, and then subsequently also seek endorsement from the EMA Management Board. So you have seen that we had an independent audit in February and a subsequent follow-up on improvement actions in April this year. We then got favorable recommendations from Prague in May this year, and subsequently also the EMA Management Board confirmed that the full functionality of the ultravigilance database has been achieved based on the audit report and the Prague recommendation. And this was formally announced on the 22nd of May 2017. And the legislation also specifies that 6 months following the announcement by the management board, the system then should become operational and go live. And our go live date is therefore set as the 22nd of November this year. So quite an exciting period for us, as you can imagine, because now we are very busy in preparing for the launch of this major update of ultravigilance. So what are the expected benefits and also the new features? So one of the key areas where we have been working and focusing on is really to implement enhanced signal detection and data analysis functions in the database, specifically focusing on the safety monitoring of medicines. And the major new change here is that also marketing authorization holders will be able to make use of these new functionalities and tools. So the benefits, the expected benefits are really a better detection of new or changing safety issues, enabling rapid action to protect public health. And as I said here, we have been working very closely with everybody to make sure that the necessary functionalities are there. Improved quality and completeness of the ICSR data. So again, this should help us to better analyze the data and also better search for the reports that we have in the system available. And enhanced scalability, taking into account also that we have now a much bigger stakeholder group to support in ultravigilance. We are extending the access of the database not only to national competent authorities, but also to marketing authorization holders. And we have also a larger number of reports to deal with, because with the new pharmacovigilance legislation and the simplified reporting rules, we will also receive non-serious adverse reactions from within the EEA. So all that needs to be supported from a scalability perspective of the system as well. I have just made reference to the simplified reporting to ultravigilance. So this is quite a new feature, because marketing authorization holders will have only a single point to report now, and this is ultravigilance. And from ultravigilance, these reports will then be rerouted to the national competent authorities. So it avoids a lot of duplication with regards to the processing and submission of individual case safety reports. It will also make the cases much faster available for data analysis. So again, here a major improvement of the overall process itself. From a process improvement, also another example is through ultravigilance, we will now make the data available directly to the World Health Organization, the Uppsala Monitoring Center. Again, the benefits here are that we are strengthening really the collaboration with the UMC. And again, we will have agreed and very fast submissions of ICSRs to the WHO, so that we can support the overall promotion of public health also on a more international level as well. And then the last feature, as I have already mentioned, and that is something I would like to further elaborate on now, is the extended access to the ultravigilance database. First of all, for marketing authorization holders, and the legislation specifies here to the extent necessary to fulfill their pharmacovigilance obligations. But in addition, we have also now enhanced features for providing access to patients and healthcare professionals. And this is really with the aim to improve the safety monitoring of medicines, but also to be more transparent and to give better access to information on potential adverse reactions to patients and healthcare professionals. And another emphasis that we have put here specifically is to protect also personal information. So we have been working very closely with our data protection experts, and we have also consulted the European Data Protection Supervisor in order to make sure that the processing and the transparency aspects in relation to ultravigilance are fully compliant with the data protection legislation. So if we look specifically at the access to patients and healthcare professionals, The access principles that have been set out in the legislation are further defined in the Ultravigilance access policy. So this is a very detailed document where you have the access principles further defined for all the different stakeholders, including patients and healthcare professionals. And the access policy also relates now to the new format that we are using for adverse reaction reporting, that is what we call the individual case safety reports. And in 2010, we have agreed with ISO through a standardization process an international format for this adverse reaction reporting, and all the data elements that can be utilized for adverse reaction reporting are also defined in the access policy. So we have now extended, when we are going live with the system, the subset of data that will be made available to patients and healthcare professionals. We will focus still on spontaneous reports. We have included new data outputs, and most importantly, we have enhanced the detailed guidance on the interpretation of the data that we will make available, but also the reports that are accessible to patients and healthcare professionals. And these guidance documents are also translated in all the EU languages. The advice to change for patients not to change their medication and always to consult their healthcare professional has been maintained and further emphasized as an overall guidance when this database is being consulted. And just to re-emphasize, the database is available through the adrreports.eu portal, and the new functionalities will be made available to you as of the 22nd of November. So just to summarize the new features, at the moment we are making mainly available aggregated data, so you have more a general representation of the number of adverse reactions we have received by either the medicine or product name for centrally authorized product, or you can also search by active substance for non-centrally authorized medicine and products, and there are different data outputs available. But as I mentioned before, the main emphasis, it's mainly aggregated data. Now, for the new features, you have also a new set of aggregated data dashboard reports, which gives you number of individual cases in the EEA for selected medicinal products and substances. Here you have the possibility to view the information on the basis of a map or on a graph, and this is how it will look like. So this is just to give you a general overview, for instance, on number of adverse reactions per medicinal product or active substance per country in the EEA, and also you have a representation in the map view or in the graph view. Just to highlight here, the graphical views are restricted to data where we have more than 3 reports per country. If we have less than 3 reports per country, we would not display this information. And again, this is mainly from data protection, from a data protection perspective, because we want to avoid that in case we have rare events related to certain medicinal products, it would not be possible to identify a specific patient group in a country, for instance. In addition, and that I think is also a major improvement, now we make available so-called line listings. So here again, you will have a tabular overview of adverse reactions that have been reported to Ultravigilance. You can again search by medicinal product for centrally authorized product or for any other type of product on the basis of the active substance. And these listings allow you also to filter, for instance, based on seriousness, geographic origin, and here the geographic origin is based on EEA or non-EEA country information. You can select or filter on the reporter group, and here we have distinguished between healthcare professional and non-healthcare professional groups. You can select on the basis of the filter, on the gender, the age group, reaction groups. Here you can group on a high level, for instance, by system organ class, but you can also filter on the reaction level itself. So the preferred term, the medical concept as reported by the primary source. And you can also select by date. The date is mainly grouped on the basis of the year where we have received the information. And the output is like that. As I said, it's an Excel spreadsheet with the different criteria upon you can further filter. And the last column, you can't see it very well, has also a hyperlink, and this hyperlink also brings you then to another view of the case information, and that is what we call the individual case report form, which I will show you in a second. So since the tabular format is not very good visible, I've just tried to summarize for you the elements that you have available in these line listings. So you have the unique reference to the report that is listed in this overview table. You have the date when the report was received by Pharmacovigilance. You will have a specification of the report type. So we have said spontaneous reports. You have information on the primary source qualification, which allows you to determine if the report comes from a healthcare professional or non-healthcare professional. And as I mentioned, you will be also able to distinguish if the source of the report is from within the EA or outside the EA. We also receive cases, individual cases from the medical literature. So if it is a report which is described in the medical literature, you will also see the reference to the literature. For the age, we have the possibility to represent the age either as part of an age group, and the age group is calculated either based on the birth date that was specified in the report, if it is provided, and the onset of the first reaction, or we have the age reported in the report itself. But again, for data privacy perspective, we group the age in certain categories. We have also the age group specified, the gender, and if we have, for instance, rare instances where we refer to a parent-child report, so where an adverse reaction occurred to the child based on the exposure by a drug through a parent, this can be also specified. And then we come to the actual information on the reaction. So here you will have then a summary on the reaction itself, the duration of the reaction, the outcome of the reaction, if it is recovered, resolved, but also the serious. For instance, in this example, it was a life-threatening event that caused prolonged hospitalization. So, and if you have more than one adverse reaction, this information is reported accordingly. And for the medicinal product, you have the medicinal product name specified if it's a centrally authorized product, or the active substance if it's a non-centrally authorized product. S would be an indication if it's a suspect medicinal product. And then you have the indication for the medicinal product as it was reported. And also what happened with the medicine. So in this case, the drug was withdrawn, so the medication was stopped by the patient after 1 day, and the overall dose was 1.5 milligram, and the route of administration was oral. So this is the type of information that you will be able to visualize in these line listings as well. So, and then I have mentioned that besides the line listing, you have also the possibility to have the view in the format of an individual case safety report form. So again, on the line listing, we cannot represent all the data that we have agreed to make available to you as part of the access policy. And therefore, the individual case safety report form is another view to give you a better representation, specifically in relation to a drug and what happened to a patient at a certain point of time. And this is just to give you the example how the individual case safety report will look like. As I said, it's directly accessible from the line listing, and here you can then view in a more structured format each case that may be of interest to you. So with that, we hope that the Vigilance system, when it goes live on the 22nd of November, will be another important milestone in relation to implementing the pharmacovigilance legislation. We will really benefit through the simplified adverse reaction reporting because we will remove a lot of duplication. We will be able to strengthen the monitoring of the safety of medicines. We will enhance the quality of the reports based on a format, an internationally agreed format. We will give better access to companies so that they can also monitor the safety of the products for which they are responsible. We will be able to strengthen our collaboration with the WHO, and we also hope that we will be able now to further increase transparency on the safety of medicines and make this information in a much more user-friendly way available to you. And with that, I thank you very much, and we will take questions later on. Thank you.
We may perhaps have one question, one very burning question, not if any. No, so then let's move on then to the next presentation, which will be presented by Georgi Genov, who is the head of the Signal and Incident Management Service and also acting head of the Pharmacovigilance and Epidemiology Department.
Okay, thank you, Xavier. Good afternoon. So this is really a brief presentation to reflect on the experience we've had so far with the signal management process and also to share some future developments. So where are we 5 years after the implementation? We started in the summer of 2012 with the new signal management process. National competent authorities and the agency were operating signal detection before the new pharmacovigilance legislation, but the legislation really didn't have any specific provisions for signal management. We believe now after 5 years we have a neat and efficient process with clear roles and responsibilities, which allows us for faster detection of safety issues and also faster warnings to users. As Ulva mentioned, when it comes to the signal management process, we don't look only at centrally authorized products. So all safety issues related to medicines authorized in Europe are being discussed, and that allows for safety issues to be addressed at EU level with all the positive consequences of harmonization and simplifications for all parties involved. We do have an increased transparency. I think you are well aware of that. I wanted to mention that point because certainly in the signal management area, we've used transparency also to support harmonization, but also simplification for all players, and I'll talk briefly about that later on. We do increasingly use validated scientific methods. So June referred to the outcomes of PROTECT, which are now embedded in our signal detection practices and all the tools we use. So those are the tools used by the agency and the network, but also in future and very near future, 2 months from now, by marketing authorization holders. And acknowledging the ever-increasing wealth of information to support safety monitoring and a variety of demands, we are quite aware that we need to focus on simplification and efficiency. Okay, so the signal management process follows the steps described in the legislation, and those are there to ensure robust evaluation of all safety issues. So currently we have the agency, when it comes to vigilance specifically, we have the agency and national competent authorities that contribute to the first steps of the signal evaluation, and then the key role of the PRAC with the analysis, the assessment, and finally issuing a recommendation that applies across all member states in Europe. We do have a contribution from marketing authorization holder at the stage of assessment, and I think I'll refer to that a little bit later. Now with the new process, there is an additional, a little earlier exchange of information between companies and regulators. For centrally authorized products, the agency takes the lead on monitoring of vigilance in collaboration with PRAC rapporteur. And when it comes to national authorized products, and we have a lot of those, the national competent authorities are supporting safety monitoring. I think it's very important that we have fully utilized the possibility for work sharing provided in the legislation. So this is basically one national competent authority takes the lead on behalf of the network for monitoring safety issues. So really important for resource consideration, but also when there are new safety issues, there is a lead, a member state that is well experienced in the issues related to this substance to take the issue forward. And we regularly update this work sharing list, and the last update was a year or so ago, and very pleased that we managed to locate quite some additional substances. So if you look at the signals discussed at PRAC, so this is from the start in 2012, few reflections here. I mean, a quite large amount of signals. We had 371 signals, which is about 11 signals per month. And then it is interesting that it's quite stable through the years. One could speculate that that is a well-established process that brings more or less the same amount of safety issues each year. Another thing to notice is the, referred to fast evaluation and warnings to users. Typically, the discussions on signals at PRAC, we'll have an initial discussion followed by follow-up discussion. So for most signals, there will be two discussions at PRAC before we reach a conclusion. There are more complex issues that would require a number of rounds of interactions with the marketing authorization holder and discussions at PRAC. But generally, within few months from detection, there will be warning that is publicly available and for the companies to act upon. So here are a few examples of what's behind the numbers. So these are issues that have been discussed through the signal management and resulted in warnings. Signal management procedure normally results in updates of 4.8 or 4.4, rarely in contraindications, but you see it's a vast variety of quite important issues, from blindness to acute renal failure, hearing loss, acute severe cutaneous reactions. And just maybe a few words on the last signal you see there, signal of increased mortality and serious adverse reaction. This signal was triggered by following a number of clinical trials were stopped following recommendation by a DSMB because of increased mortality. And then we triggered a signal that was discussed at PRAC, which resulted in DHPC to discourage off-label use, because it transpired those trials are not really in the authorized indication. And that was the first question, is there an impact on the authorized indication? So to discourage off-label use and also to contraindicate that quite specific patient population, which was basically experiencing higher mortality from the product. And I move on to the outcomes. Here you see about 50%, so half of the signals discussed at PRAC led to labeling change. There's about a third that resulted in routine pharmacovigilance. So the issue is still kept under monitoring, but did not lead to any action. And there's a number of ongoing issues, of course, at the time when we took this, the metrics. Few of the signals resulted in referrals, and we did find that's quite a nice for urgent safety issues until we gather more information and we decide which is the right regulatory frame to discuss those. A signal management procedure in this case is quite nicely contributed to more measured decision making, if you want. So another thing to flag here, and maybe we can touch base during the discussion, but this is the point from Francois. with regards to how do we communicate the outcomes of, so patients report and healthcare professional report, ADRs, and you mentioned, it was quite interesting for me, this anxiety if this reporting wouldn't lead to withdrawal of the product. I mean, for for this procedure specifically, it's quite clear. It's not really the procedure designed to lead to suspension, so it's mostly warnings, updates of the or contraindication to the label. But maybe we can discuss that a little bit further, how we can build a narrative, I mean, we normally describe our work in big novels, many volumes, so it's probably need a short story to explain to the external world. In terms of transparency, all the outcomes of the PRAC in terms of recommendations are on our website, and we also provide translations of those. And the reason we started doing is firstly to ensure that the products are harmonized, and also providing a translation simplifies life for industry and for regulators, because it's a much easier variation that can be smoothly handled once the committee had agreed on what exactly the wording of the change will be. And then just for your use, we do have the summary. There is a table at the bottom of this page where we have the summary of all the issues that have been discussed at PRAC. So you can very easily, in 2 clicks, find if an issue has been discussed, what sort of issue, and then you see the link to the outcome. So that immediately will bring you to the PRAC minutes. I personally use that whenever I need to remind myself if something has been discussed or not. It's kind of the easiest way to access the information. Importantly to notice, to mention is this is the ADR website, which was created in 2012, launched in May, further enhanced in 2014 with additional substances, and now with in November, after November, it will be further enhanced with inclusion of non-serious reports, and also moving from aggregated data to individual case data. So what is coming? Again, in November, the new provisions in the legislations for marketing authorization holders to have extended access to vigilance and to monitor vigilance are coming into place. There's also provisions for companies to validate signals from vigilance to inform competent authorities. I think that's quite an important change in terms of interaction. So to address these changes, we are updating the relevant GVP module on signal management, the main change being related to this process, but also some clarification when it comes to emerging safety issues. And this is another route for industry to report really important safety issues that require urgent attention. And we're operating it now for a few years. Some reflection on periodicity to have a risk-based approach, and then clarification on roles and responsibilities. We also have the new addendum on the methodological aspects, and we plan to publish in October this year. So with these new provisions, we've discussed at length within the network, but also grateful for all contributions from colleagues from industry, how to make that in a pragmatic and helpful manner, because it is a major change. So we have agreed that we will have a pilot, a sort of a transitional period. The pilot will start on 22nd of February, so that's next year. This allows for 3 months grace period between November this year and then the start of the pilot, to allow companies to get used to the system and the tools available, to reflect any changes required in their operating procedures. And then we'll run that pilot for 1 year. We will include substances that are on the list of products under additional monitoring. So we wanted to focus on really the products that required closer monitoring. And for all other substances, obviously, companies will have access to vigilance, and they can include that additional data into your safety evaluation, but there's no requirement to follow the next steps, which are validation of signals to be then forwarded to the regulators. So you can still use, for the companies not included in the pilot, you still use the existing routes. We have the PSURs, we have variations, we have a number of options. So this is my last slide, and if we move back a little bit from all the technical details and all the complexity that comes with an implementation of a new process on all sides, really. It's important, I think, to acknowledge that these new provisions offer a very good opportunity in terms of signal management. So Vigilance is one of the largest databases in the world. We have more than 6 million cases and more than, I believe, 10 million ICSRs in the system. So it's very, very important source of information. It is, and that's probably unique to Vigilance, it is subject to quality control and duplicate detection, provides all stakeholders with information in real life. The tools that we will share with companies are tools that are based on evidence-based research projects and that have been used now for over a number of years by the agency and by the network. So I think this is important to acknowledge. And as I mentioned previously, it offers an opportunity, but we really, that's a plea for us to work together to have a pragmatic, efficient and collaborative way to get the best out of it. So thanks very much for your attention. Happy to take burning questions.
Are there any one or two burning questions now? Okay, so good. So
presentation.
we will now have two presentations on these important topics of registries. And over the last 2 years, when we started this initiative, the amount of interest about using disease registries and having engagement from patients, associations, healthcare professionals, registry holders, industry has been tremendous. And you may remember that couple of, I don't know, in one of the last stakeholder meetings, I presented our reflections about where we think we could go in this initiative on patient registries. And I terminated and said that EMA was putting a machinery in place in order to really start this initiative and be pragmatic and implement this initiative. And what I would like to briefly present now is what we have done since last year, since our last presentation. And also afterwards, we will have a presentation by on the patient perspective regarding the disease registries, and we have collaborations with our colleague from the multiple sclerosis platform on disease registries. So the landmark event has been the patient registries workshop that took place last year on 28th of October. We organized this workshop in order to know from all the stakeholders, and we convened industry, the registry, large number of registry holders, patient association, healthcare professionals, to really think about what would be needed and what would be the opportunities of using these registries to support medicines evaluations and the benefit risk of medicine. And this was a very important realization for regulators to see that there was an important expectation from all the stakeholders of the role of the regulators in the better use of disease registries and more extensive use of disease registries. And this was presented during the workshop. And so what we know as called this broken triangle, it was the realization that regulatory authorities are requesting pharmaceutical companies to initiate registries or to use registries, and then the pharmaceutical companies go to the registry holders and or academic specialists in order to have information and to get the data they are collecting, but the registry holders do not trust or do not have confidence in the pharmaceutical companies sometimes. So there was really a need to close this broken triangle and to have much more contacts between regulatory authorities and registry holders. And this communication between these two bodies are important for at least two reasons. First of all, registry authorities need to better know what can be collected in registries when they are requesting companies to collect to provide data from registries. So what are the information collected already and what could be collected if needed. And secondly, the registry holders would need to know and to learn about what are the reasons and what are the rationale for requesting some data to companies, and also registry holders may need to understand the constraints, regulatory constraints that are imposed on companies, and we realize that often registry holders do not know very well the regulatory environment and are not familiar to it. So there is really this need to have a more cooperation between all parties in order to better use the data that are available. So we set up a cross-committee task force, and this task force is composed of members of the scientific committees, and these include PRAC, CHMP, Scientific Advice Working Party, the CAT, and Patients and Healthcare Professional Association. There are also experts from national competent authorities and EMEA staff. It is co-chaired by a representative from National Competent Authority, by Professor Mol from the Netherlands, and also there are an EMEA representative. So what is the mandate of the task force? It oversees the establishment and running of the patient registry initiatives, and it reports to the committees, to the scientific advice, and also to the scientific committees board. Just one word about the governance. So this cross-committee task force coordinates the work, but working groups are established on the action of the task force, and especially when the task force received requests from committees to explore the possible use of some disease registries to monitor the safety of some product, then there are a call for volunteers from the task force and or from other groups to participate in disease area tasks, or where there are some need for specialization and knowledge of the data source that are existing for some diseases. The main vision that we have identified, and which that is represented here, is first of all on the right, we need to capitalize on what is already existing. We realize that there are registries existing for nearly every disease, that there are somewhere groups of specialists, a group of physicians or patient associations or that have started to collect data on patients and to follow up these patients and to follow up this information. Therefore, we really need to identify these incredible wealth of information that is already out there and to capitalize on them. We need to use this information in order to protect public health through the better use of the data. So we also need to protect and to we're responsible for the proper use of this data in order that this data can also benefit to the patients. And then we have to facilitate, this is more technical, but harmonization of the data collected in disease registries. There are often several registries or many registries for the same disease or for the same type of same indications, and using disparate data collection forms or formats, and therefore one objective is also to facilitate harmonization of this data so that we can use data from a larger number of patients. This is the achievement in 2017. So we have published the report from the task force in February. We have, based on the task force, revised the mandate of the patient registries initiatives. Then we have published a new vision and the strategy for the patient registries. We have also developed a communication strategy. And then I'm going to report on these 2 workshops that we organized in June and July on cystic fibrosis registries and also on the multiple sclerosis registries. And we have a number of other initiatives that are planned. So these 2 workshops on cystic fibrosis and multiple sclerosis, this workshop we are organized because, first of all, there are a number of products that are already on the market, and there are a number of products which are in the pipeline. So these products will arrive on the market and then will probably be requested to follow up patients and to provide data from registries. And also, the disease registries holders themselves have requested to support for harmonizing their data. So we addressed 3 main topics, the common data elements, then the governance aspects, including informed consents, data protection, access to the data, and then other scientific aspects linked to the common protocol, interoperability of registry, and quality assurance. The final outcomes will be draft guidance for these 2 diseases, but also these examples would be used as models for other diseases, and we plan for January 2017 to publish, at least for consultation in the beginning, general guidance on better use of disease registries for regulatory purpose. Just to mention that we use for these 2 workshops some kind of innovative methods, at least in our for EMA, is that we divided before the workshop the participants into 3 working groups, and these participants were assigned some homework. So people were asked to do some homework before the workshop and to submit their homework, which we compiled. And then we divided the workshop in 3 breaking sessions, where there was a dynamic and interactive discussions in order to reach results. And I think the productivity of this workshop in 1 day was absolutely probably unprecedented from what I know, at least. So what are the main findings is that there are 2 different situations. The cystic fibrosis registries are already rather mature, and they have already established a single European registry. They have a common platform, and they have some core data elements. However, what they needed to address and to discuss is how their data could be better accessed, how they could provide, what would be the condition for providing the data, and what would be the procedure and processes for that. The multiple sclerosis registries landscape is a bit different, and they probably will be covered afterwards, but it is much more heterogeneous, and there are 2 main registry holder groups without a single registry platform, and there are limited collection of common data elements across registries. So there was more work, I would say, to do in the field of multiple sclerosis. But for both diseases, the main actions were to confirm the possibility to share data and to provide access to their data, to discuss processes for data request and provision, and also to introduce systematic quality assurance measures, which are important. And for multiple sclerosis, the agreement on the core common data set is an important challenge to be meet in the future. General recommendations were that there is a need to optimize the use of the data from registries in order to support the regulatory benefit risk evaluation. But for that, it is important to have early discussions on registries in the authorization process, so that there is enough time to discuss with the registry holders what can be done and if there is a need to collect additional data, then how to do it and which data to collect. The quality of the registry data is very important to provide confidence to marketing authorization holders, but other users. And there is one main registry platform that has submitted a procedure for qualification to the scientific advice. So this is a very important step forward. And also we need, as I mentioned, to improve communications between all the stakeholders, all the interested and concerned by the registry landscape. The next step is that we are going to publish, so in the coming weeks, the report from the Cystic Fibrosis and Multiple Sclerosis Registries workshop with very important recommendations, and also especially on the collection of, first of all, core data elements, but also additional data elements that would be useful. And these reports, there was a rather long consultation process from all participants because we wanted that these reports and these recommendations are agreed by all the stakeholders, and this is the case now. These reports have been agreed by all the companies involved by these products, by the registry holders, by the regulators. So this is an important step forward to have a common agreement on these recommendations. We will publish also key principles for the use of registries from regulatory perspective, and we hope to be able to organize a potential workshop on registries for CAR T cells next year, because this is a new class of therapies for cancer that are arriving. For EMA, there were also a number of actions, and we explore the possibility for a qualification process for registries. And if this group that has applied for qualification will get it, then it is very important, because then they will have some kind of quality assurance and certification that the data can be used by companies for regulatory purpose. There is also, we are also working on the creation of an inventory of registries based on the NCEP resource database. This is being done progressively, but no, I think we have 80 registries for which we try to assess the quality and the accuracy of the information. Conclusions. The patient follow-up through disease registries is increasingly requested by regulators. This is a fact, and especially because there are more and more rare diseases that are applied for authorization, and with a few number of patients, therefore treated patients need to be followed up after authorization. And also what we see, as I said, for 2 years now, that there is a shift of the paradigm of the culture, even from product registry owned by a single company to a joint collaboration between companies to use disease registries for long-term patient follow-up. And I think this change of mindset and change of culture is very important, and perhaps it is slow, but we see that even at the level of companies, that this is being, this change is occurring. However, in order for this to be effective, there is a need for earlier discussions between registry holders and companies and regulators at an early stage, and we promote the use of scientific advice by companies for these discussions. Generally, there is a gap between the amount and type of data collected in the disease registries and the data requested by regulators, and that we observe that for all the discussion that we have, and therefore early discussion need to take place in order to fill that gap, and we hope that we are supporting this. The experience from the cystic fibrosis and multiple sclerosis registry show that there is a very high level of interest from all stakeholders and companies, registry holders, HTA bodies, and others to collaborate in order to better use the data that are out there. Independent quality certification may provide confidence in registry data, and it's very good news that we are going there, at least for one large disease, and also we are developing tools with regulatory authorities to support the use of the data with guidance, and also we this set of common core data elements. So this is work ongoing, but this is progressing. So this is my last slide. Thank you.
Any burning question to Xavier now? Okay, now, so I would like to invite Christoph and Jana for their presentation on disease registers and pension.
If you allow me to do that from the seat here, just that you see me once. My name is Christoph Thalheim. I'm working for the European Multiple Sclerosis Platform, and my colleague Jana will present herself in a moment. So I just wanted to add a little bit to what Xavier said so brilliantly regarding the patient registry initiative. And I apologize in advance that some in the room have heard what I'm saying and have seen the slides already yesterday. That was unavoidable in order to cover both groups. What I want to explain is a little bit the role of multiple sclerosis in this context here and our experiences so far. What you see there on the slide here is the representation of our member organizations. We are the umbrella of currently 35 members, 35 countries and 40 members all over Europe and represent around about 700,000 people with multiple sclerosis. And over the past 5 years, we had up to 13 registries and other partners involved in a project which came up with a proof of concept for temporary pooling of registry data coming from completely fragmented and different registries from different countries. And unfortunately, the attempt to the Horizon 2020 to bring all registries which we knew at that time, meaning last year, to come to a round table and present their cooperation module to the Commission. That failed, so there was no funding approval, but we learned a lot of things for a second approach, and I will talk about that in a moment. Next slide, please. So what you see here is we have learned a lot from this initiative from the EMA, but we also had our own discussions with the different registries and their holders, and came to the conclusion that this kind of structure of data being collected on national level and then pooled in a cloud for analysis and being supervised by a multi-stakeholder group, which would include people from the scientific community, people from the patient community, the EMA or NATA, and there would be a specific analysis group, and overall a joint coordination center and or something more lightly like a single contact point. And in terms of funding, the idea is to have two sources or two levels of funding. Obviously, the registries on national level need to be ensured that their extra work they are asked to do will pay off, and they have sustainable funding for their administration and for their staff. And that could be organized via some kind of individual national approaches in terms of public-private partnerships, or depending where money is already available from the public side, the industry could contribute to that as well. And then on a European level, when there is a need for data being pooled and being delivered on European level and analyzed on European level, then extra fees would apply. Next slide, please. One of the things we are working on, not only European level, but also on the global level, is the definition and hopefully soon then implementation of commonly agreed patient-reported outcome measures, which would be of patient relevance, but also of relevance for all the other stakeholders. So some of you who were involved in this kind of work already and with registries, they might know that we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. There are a lot of examples where other clever people have done work in this patient-reported outcome measure settings, and reference is possible and support is available there. And I mention here a couple of examples, such as the COMET database and the ICF model, which is, I believe, with WHO. And a non-profit organization called ICOM, which helps so far 13 chronic diseases to define and implement their patient-reported outcome measures. And another source I would like to mention is DOIT. DOIT is the coordination and support activity by the IMI series of big data for better outcome. The industry should know about that. And in this context, there's a lot of work being done currently related to what will be needed for the making fit for purpose of registries, including patient-reported outcome settings and informed consent templates, harmonization, and other aspects. Next slide, please. Just as a few key points for patient organizations, but also for any other organization who is either active or interested in data collection. As I mentioned, there's a wealth of information, guidelines, and good practice already, starting from parent, a joint action, the already mentioned patient registry initiative, COMET, ICF, ICOM, and so on. The link here, quite obvious, to pharmacovigilance is for me the post-authorization safety study, which should be possible to be done, and in part is already done by registries which are fit for that purpose. But there are also possibilities for comparative effectiveness trials for several existing therapies at the same time, and plans, as I heard from industry, are already on its way. And the regulators' move from the drug registry data to patient registry data has started. I think that's a fact. And pretty soon, I think HTA and payers will follow. So there's a call to be part of this development together with the healthcare professional organization. And a last point I would like to mention is I'm very happy, and EMSP is very happy with its cooperation with EMA in this context. But we also hope that EMA and UNETA will agree on some common efforts to bring in their interests in this minimal data set. So that not only the EMA needs are covered in future by a Europe harmonized collection of data, but also the HTA and the payers' needs should be included there. Thank you for your attention. And I hand over to my colleague Jana, who will give her perspective as a patient with multiple sclerosis.
Thank you very much for the possibility to speak to you as a patient as well. First and foremost, I want to thank everyone involved in the Patient Registries Initiative and the EMA Patient Registries Initiative for your great effort that you're making, and also for making patients partners in the process, which is not always the case all around Europe. to introduce myself, my name is Jana. I'm MS patient. I was diagnosed in 2012, and I've been active since in various patient organizations, in one taking care and associating people with multiple sclerosis, young people with multiple sclerosis. Now I'm very proud to be the part of EMSP as well as the young patients representative. And I have to declare first that I'm a huge enthusiast into the data collection as a patient, because from what my experience is and what is quite obvious, patients need the solutions. They need them very effectively. They need them quickly. And patient registries are one of the very effective tools, if used properly and effectively, of course, to find the answers because of collecting the data on different aspects of disease, including the quality of life, the treatment that we really need in the joint effort to help patients in general. So first, oh yeah, next slide, because I'm not right. Thank you so much. I'm speaking from the patient's perspective. That differs a lot. Some patients are really willing to contribute to the data collection, knowing that they will make a contribution not only to themselves, but also the others. And they are really eager to help the research and all other aims and benefits of the data collection. But of course, there are concerns, and a lot of patients, or some patients, do not feel safe providing the data on their cause of the disease. And maybe I want to add to this discussion from today about the fear of losing the treatment because of reporting the adverse effects and the fear of withdrawal of the medication. From the experience what we had in launching the registry in the Czech Republic, where I come from, it was not only this fear, but also the fear of losing medication in general by reporting to the registries. It was one of the major concerns that that some people will report something that will then prevent them from getting the treatment, because and it may not have been subjective or relevant, but that the insurance companies will see that in some cases, when the diagnosis is very difficult and you don't know whether you do or do not fulfill the indication criteria, that this will be taken from them. And it will then lead me to the question, why is it so important for patients to be partners and also owners of the registries, to make sure that these concerns won't be a reality and will also not prevent people from reporting. Then it's really important for patients to know. For example, I'm really glad to know that some of the data collected are already helping the decision makers in making decisions about the availability of care, providing the information about the numbers and the effectiveness. But unfortunately, it's not always the case that patients are on the board when the registries are set and governed. So there is a risk that some of the patient-relevant data might be left out. And so it's very important question how to involve patients the best to ensure that these data are not left out. So I also have to say then in this presentation, I'm also deriving information from my experience, from experience of our organizations, from the numerous discussions, but also the survey. It's not based on survey, and I want to give my congratulations to Evrodis for making the survey in 2012 and 2013, and I will refer to it, the patient survey on the registries, in the next slide that I will ask. So there is no doubt about the importance of data to the patient, being it how important they are to the research, to understand the disease, to look at the causes and the risk factors of the disease, especially with the diseases that the causes are not yet known, and we are trying to grab every single bit to have some clue. Also the practice in planning the care, the social and health care according to the needs of the patient, the disease management schemes, the access of treatment, what I have been speaking about before, the availability of the data to the regulatory mechanism and the decision makers, the importance of data about the effectiveness and safety of treatment, and the information in general about the disease and its course. For me as a patient, it's important to have the most information I can to be able to make decisions about myself as well, and to be nothing empowers you more than good access to information and having your voice heard. Also here I want to emphasize the results of the patient survey of the EuroRDIS that also asked more than 3,000 patients about their expectations from the registries and what should be the aim of the registries, with the most preferences of the healthcare and social service planning, the evaluation and monitoring of safety and efficacy of treatment, and description of the disease. And I'm glad that my views very corresponded with this as well, and it was great to check against a real evidence-based survey. So, and for the next slide. So, but there are many things that patients need to be okay in providing the data. First, the information about the registry, about its aims, about the character of the registries, the data protection system, of course, about the rights of participants or patients in this registry, and also who has access to data and how are the data used. Informed consent, of course, that should be made understandable to the patient, and the data protection, ensuring the safety and confidentiality of data, and also the proper use of data. I think these are very well known, but what, for example, came to my mind later on when being interested in the patient registries were two aspects that are adding a lot to willingness of patients to contribute. If I want to ask for the next slide, it is the accessibility and transparency of information, not only the information about the survey, but also the results and the participation of patients. First, the information and the importance of the results being available to patients as well. As it was said here before, it's very important for you to have the feedback on the data that you're reporting, to understand the elements of data collection, to be able to understand and clarify the safety concerns, to be able to be informed about the outcomes that will help you as well. And it's especially important also for patient associations to be able to use the data for their users as well. And participation, because nothing will make you more adherent to treatment or more willing to contribute if you are treated as a partner and if you really feel like a partner and behave like a partner. So it's very important to involve patients in the setting of the registries, in the governance of them, and making sure that the patient-relevant data will be collected, that the voice, that the priorities will be voiced and taken in account. Because I feel a really genuine interest of patients and wish to be useful as well to themselves and to the others in the collective effort to make their life better. And the next slide has something more about the participation, because it really makes it easier for identification and collection of the patient-relevant data. It gives the insight and feedback of the patient, safeguarding also that some of the importance that won't be left out. and also incorporating the patient's interest, which in the debate, in every patient empowerment debate, it's important that on the board you have an actor whose primary and only interest is the patient's interest. And this adds to what I was saying when assuring that patient will feel safe about providing their data, that the provision of the data won't harm them in access to care. If you have someone responsible, if you have someone on the board making decisions on your behalf as well, who will even raise more the voice to ensure that this will not be true and that this will be prevented and that people don't have to be afraid in providing the data, for example. Then the involvement is important for ensuring accessibility and better understanding of the processes to the patients. Also, when something is understandable and accessible by this, it means that people will be more able to be informed, so the effective dissemination of information. And of course, it increases the feeling of ownership, which motivates a lot to contribute, which empowers patients greatly. So it's important to have, yes, it was right. You're just reading my mind, so, and the slides. So it's important for patients to be there at the beginning, to be at the governing bodies and have certain rights in the processes. For example, from the Czech Republic experience, I'm really glad that there is a mechanism then when the data from the registries are to be provided to other actors that are in the previous, the common cohort of actors that have access to data, that there is a body that will decide jointly whether this data will be provided, and there are representatives of various stakeholders, including patient. Even the one voice is just fair, and it makes me feel good about the protection of the data as well. So may that be the last slide, or maybe there is one more? Yes. So this is like a conclusion. For me as a patient, it's important to make sure in the patient registries that patients have sufficient access to information about the registry as well as the results, and that we make sure that they understand the information, that the needs and priorities of patients are considered in setting the registries, that patients can participate in the data collection, and that patients are safe in the matter of protection of their privacy. So these are the factors that may help in the increasing the willingness of patients in collaborating and being the real partners in the process. That is really, really important, and that I want to thank you very much for. So this is it. Thank you very much for attention.
Thank you very much, Jana, for your presentation. And I would like to thank to all the speakers from this session for their presentation. And I will kindly ask you to ask questions to the open discussion.
Maybe my question can open the floor for further questions. So Sinia Skola representing FPA, so European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries and Associations. And I would just like to congratulate the patient organization representatives for this really good insight. And I think now today discussing about the registries and patients' involvement in registries work is similarly so important to include the patient in drug development. And I think the trend can be seen in overall drug development process that we, both decision makers but also the ones who do the research and development, really welcome patients in that work. So I think we are on a right path Then one particular question, I was wondering if you have any information on how many patient organizations today in Europe are part of registries initiatives. Do you have any idea of the numbers? Would be just interesting to know.
Unfortunately, I fail to be able to give a good answer on that. I know there is quite a variation. So one of the obstacles we saw in our work for the last 5-6 years in bringing these registries together was that in our specific case, there were some registries being actually supervised and in the hands of the patient organizations. The Germans, for example, in MS, they have their own MS registry, and the German MS Society is running it. The same in Denmark, where the Danish MS Society is in charge, but then the real leader is a neurologist, and he sees himself as the portal for access, and not the patients play the major role, but this doctor. So I'm just giving concrete examples for a very fragmented situation. And when I look to other other registries, for example, in the field of cystic fibrosis mentioned earlier here, then it is not the patient organization who is running that, but the healthcare professionals. So I would assume, but maybe you know more about that, François, I would assume that the minority of the registries is really run or controlled or strongly influenced by the patient side.
Yes, Kathleen, please.
I'm speaking now as board member of Euroataxia. Next week, we will try to set up or start with a patient registry. And the problem, in my opinion, is the sustainability. Like, it costs a lot of money, and we had a few years ago a registry led by a neurologist, and because there was no funding, it was stopped, and all the data are outdated, so we can't use that anymore. But we are going to discuss and try to set up a new registry again. But funding is a big, big problem.
Okay.
Good afternoon, I'm Erna Botjes, representing the European Federation of Allergy and Airways Disease Patient Organizations, and I was involved as executive and also as ethical coordinator in huge European project of the 7th framework. And when you talk about ethics, first I'm very enthusiastic about registrations. But there are ethical questions to address. Who has the intellectual property? When the site goes down, who's go in? The registration is about a child, and the child became 18 years. Will it go out of the registry because it's an adult at that moment? And also, how is the link between the patient and the data? Is there a direct link, or is there a key so you can't identify the patient anymore? So there are some issues to be addressed when you have such a huge registration website and data bank.
Can you, I don't know, Christophe, can you answer from your experience of the multiple sclerosis registries, how this is being done?
Well, I fully agree that the way to a properly functioning registry is a quite stony one. And different solutions have been found for different questions in different countries. And I only can talk about the MS experiences, but yes. Next year, with the data protection regulation, I guess things will become a little bit easier, or at least clearer. Maybe not easier, but clearer. For the moment, the interpretation of what data protection means in terms of registry data is very much dependent on the national law. Yeah. Also on the willingness by individual registry holders to interpret more widely or more strictly that what you see there. So there is no general recommendation how to handle that. But yeah, just on the other question of the finances, again, a concrete example, my German colleagues managed to get all MS-interested pharma companies in one room to talk with them about a kind of consortium to fund the registry on a long run. So that means that a lot of cooperation agreements need to be signed and identified. It means that the industry will be forced to not only act alone in their own interests, but also on common interests when they are talking about data from registries. But it could be a model for the future to make that national level of the registry sustainable, in the interest of everyone who uses this data afterwards.
Can I just extend your comment that it would be also useful to involve regulators in such meetings, because the companies will use registries if they can, the registries can collect the data that are requested by regulators. So sometimes that's why we are promoting this triangle, that all collaboration between. I think this is a win-win situation for everybody if everybody is collaborating with one another. Yeah.
I fully agree, and that was indeed also the intention to talk with EMA about next steps after this workshop here, on the workshop on registries. To what extent can EMA involved in a more regular way in discussions to make a practical, functional MS Data Alliance or a network of registries happen?
Perhaps it's a tip for the patient organization in this room. I learned a lot from the Bill Gates Foundation. They have a couple of excellent professors in Oxford, and you can go there on a 2-3 days course how to deal with your patient's information and to save, because the Bill Gates Foundation was very famous with his malaria project, and many children were involved in that sort, and you learn how to handle with each country, in this case in Europe, and how to make sure that all the data is safe and also destroyed after 10 years or 20 years, and how to coach the patient who use these registries.
Is François?
I have 3 questions, one for each speaker. So the first one to Sabine. I think, as far as I can remember, patient organizations in this agency have asked for non-serious adverse drug reactions to be analyzed, but now that they are here, how are we going to do that, and for which actions? I don't think we thought about it as we should have. I don't know if other jurisdictions are making any use of the non-serious adverse drug reactions reports they have, and maybe that's something to put on the agenda of the Patients and Consumers Working Party for the next years to discuss with you how we are going to use that. The second question is to Georgie. You were mentioning the narrative. I think here also we could help behind all these signals and the regulatory actions. Even if the agency is producing a lot of very precise and scientific information with the outcome of the evaluation and then recommendations, if, in addition, we could help in telling stories to the public. This comes from a first report by a healthcare professional who published on this date in a magazine, and then this happened so many days later. It could really help the public better understand all the pharmacovigilance machinery that is behind in simple terms. And I think we just need 10, 12 cases that even the media could use to explain how it works with different cases, sometimes coming from industry and other sources. I think that could help. And the third question is on registries. Yesterday we were discussing compassionate use programs. And one difficulty from these programs is that it's difficult to collect standardized data, standardized safety data of interest for regulators prior to the marketing authorization. So my question is, for the products for which registries exist when products are in development, have you been discussing the scientific advice or other meetings how to use the existing registries to collect standardized data from the compassionate use programs to generate data that could be of interest to regulators?
Okay, thank you, Françoise. No, I think it's a very valid point. For the moment, we have mainly experience with non-serious reports on the basis of what is discussed in the periodic safety update reports. Now, some member states already collect them actively, but now we are collecting them systematically from all EEA member states, and that is certainly a valid point that we maybe need to have a specific focus on how we want to look at these non-serious cases, and perhaps put a specific focus on impact of the quality of life and this kind of aspects, which is quite different from dealing with the more serious cases. So certainly something that we might want to come back. Thank you for raising that.
Yeah, and François, just to thank you, really, I think I really welcome your suggestion. I mean, in a way, we really are using cold spontaneous reports, other reports in user vigilance. I think to the maximum. We are monitoring really closely, and it's a lot of effort monitoring those. We are now opening to marketing authorization holders to have access to this database. We are forwarding those reports to WHO, and there's a lot of signals that are really adding value going to PRAC. I think we are learning now how to really illustrate that, and we've not been, I have to say, as regulators, not very good at that. We tend to be very technical. If you look at the agency annual reports, you see that in the last 2 years is moving from a really long narrative with graphs that unless you know the material, it'll be difficult to understand, to really visual way of. So I think it's really good initiative. I'll just take 10 seconds, Xavier, if you allow me. As we're talking about patient reporting, and I forgot to flag that we have launched, together with the European Commission, a survey on patient reporting, which says that the main focus is on products under additional monitoring, but also links to the overall understanding of ADR reporting. It's really important survey for us, and it's open until 9th of October. There is a link on the agency website, and we've asked also colleagues within the network to have that link within the different national competent authorities. I don't know the numbers now, but the first few days after we've opened it, we already had a number of hundreds of surveys being filled in. Will be really helpful if we can further spread the word. Thank you.
For the third question, the discussion that we have had in the workshop on cystic fibrosis and multiple sclerosis has highlighted that registries are generally not well suited for signal detection. And the reason is that in many registries, actually the data are uploaded in a platform or are compiled and analyzed once every 6 months or one every year. And therefore, there is very limited possibility for doing signal detection quickly in order to detect new signals that may arise. On the other hand, registries may be very well suited for signal evaluation when there is a specific question, and then there may be, for example, the data collection system may flag one when a specialist, a patient or a physician enter words, for example, let's say leukopenia, then there is a flag saying that this should be reported. So the registries may be suited to encourage indeed the spontaneous reporting by physicians when there is information that is entered, but in order to do analysis of signals or safety issues, they are much less adapted to that.
Yes, but apart from signal detection, for example, because in compassionate use, typically you have quite a different population than in clinical trials. You have patients with liver impaired or kidney impaired. Maybe with the registries, you can monitor the dose reduction and see which outcomes you can measure. So not exactly signal detection, but still pharmacovigilance prior to marketing authorization to collect some standard information on these other populations.
No, this is then certainly possible, and this should be done based on a protocol and so that would be certainly possible to once, but this would be again a retrospective analysis, not.
Yes, regarding this discussion, if you want to include the patient perspective more, then I understand, of course, what you mean with non-serious, but my experiences with LAREP, the Dutch Center for the Reporting of ADRs, is that where we have already since 2002 reports from patients, that you must be careful with the term non-serious. Patients, we did some surveys, and every 2 years we have a survey actually, and in that survey we've asked, of course, what is for the patient, what is for the healthcare professional reported, the seriousness of it. And what you then see is that there's no difference in the quality of the reports we get. All groups are reporting the same ADRs, but there's a difference in the seriousness they level it. And for instance, to give you one significant example, and I think that many patients will understand that, for patients it's very important to, if they speak about serious or not serious, how much is the effect on my daily life? And so fatigue, which is very low rated in the terms of seriousness by healthcare professionals, is much higher rated and often very high rated by patients. That's one example.
Thank you very much, Albert.
I just want to add some point on non-serious case. I think serious and severity is something different. And you're referring to severity. I think that's what should be considered. Serious is just hospitalization, the outcome, which is a regulatory term for reporting purposes. It doesn't mean that it's something which is not as valued as a non-serious case. I think the severity is the most important point. Yeah.
Okay.
But in line with that, we did a questionnaire on lots of patients because we had to deal with anaphylaxis and also more severe incidents. But for patients, severe is when you have to go to the doctor. That's severe, not what we think what's severe. So there's a little misunderstanding.
Okay, thank you very much for this impressive discussion. And I would like once again to thank all speakers for taking part in this session on improvement for public health. And I would like to share also with one reflection, my own reflection on this session. Well, for me as a patient, this session proves, as again, every single meeting on pharmacovigilance proves that medicine's development does not end on medicine's authorization process. How important it is to make everything that is possible, every studies, every investigation, including all pharmacovigilance activities, to improve the knowledge, to improve patients' access to information on medicines that already are accepted, are approved. And that information helps to make decision on proper and the most effective treatment to all patients, I believe. Thank you very much.